Do you know, Ed Byrne's sitting here on the sofa with us this morning thinking, what have I stepped into?
No, I love it. We're talking about building things out of matches, because I've seen somebody do it. And when you think of, like, when you're building something out of matches, you think, oh, how painstaking it's going to be, you're adding one match at a time. But what they do is they glue them all together to make, like, blocks of wood.
Yeah.
And then they just, like, turn them and carve them as if they were just a block of wood. It's just one extra little step in the process.
You're like an enthusiast.
I know, but I'm enthused, but I'm also kind of ragging on it. I'm also looking down on it.
You might see it later. It's impressive.
Not difficult as they make it out to be. Just saying.
It's 23 foot tall. It's the Eiffel Tower. Don't knock it.
OK. I mean, I made some cupboards that were like 10 foot tall. It was
not out of matchsticks, though.
No, but that's just because I missed out that one step in the process. Wood. You can buy wood, you know, mate.
Yes,
you got the wood before it was chopped up into the matchsticks. OK, should we do your official intro?
Yes, let's do.
They say laughter is the best medicine. Something, obviously, that comedian Ed Byrne puts to the test, and he's doing so in his latest stand-up tour.
Yeah, so it's called Tragedy Plus Time. Ed will explain properly in a moment, but it is dedicated to Ed's brother, Paul, who died in 2022, aims to capture their sibling rivalry and reconciliation. We can have a look at the tour, chat to Ed in just a moment.
I went to visit him in hospital back in November 2021, and his liver had failed. I say it failed. It didn't do it on its own. There was a certain amount of user error involved. If that was a dishwasher, he definitely violated the warranty on it, okay? You can't just keep shoving in more dishes when it's still working on the dishes that are in there.
Liver.
I suppose, in a way, Ed, what we were just doing a moment ago, we were just chatting about nonsense, and then, clunk, we talk about the death of your brother.
Yeah.
And that's very much this tour, isn't it? Because you're a comedian. This tour is about grief. Would that be fair to say?
It's a weird thing to drop into people's laps early doors in a comedy show, you know, the show is about, you know, death. But having said that, the last 2 or 3 shows I've done have been about my having kids, and that really turns people off. I have to be that. You can sometimes look at the audience and particularly when there's young people there, because I get a lot more young people coming to the shows these days than I used to. Not because I've broken through on TikTok, but because my regular audience is now of an age where their kids are old enough they can bring them to the shows. Yeah. And you can still see them. And in previous shows when I've talked about like being a parent, it's very alienating. Whereas, you know, everyone at some point is going to die. And probably everyone you know is going to die, and they may do it before you do. So it's kind of more of a universal experience. So it's weirdly more of an accessible thing to talk about.
What was your relationship with your brother Paul like?
We obviously loved each other, but it was volatile, and there's a whole section in the show about having rows and then not talking. The fact that we had a massive row about 16 months before he died that led to us not talking for almost a year. And, you know, but then we did reconcile, and then the sort of climax of the show is about the reconciliation we have, which was actually via WhatsApp, which I then get to share with the audience. And it all sounds very, you know, maudlin, but it's genuinely fun, because he was a comedy writer and a comedy director, and his thing was working with comedians to make them funny and take like 20 minutes of jokes and turn that into a one-person show. And his main thing was trying to take their pain, what was bothering them, you know, stuff like that. And he says you can be as serious and you can be as heartfelt as you want, but there has to be a joke. There always has to be something funny coming. And that's why I feel like I've tried to serve that. By there's always a joke. As serious and as sad as the story is, there's always a joke.
Do you think he would approve? And do you think he would have notes?
Oh, he'd absolutely have notes. And no doubt we'd have argued about it and then not spoken for ages, because he'd said, why don't you move that to the start and that to the end? But then it won't work. Well, of course it'll work. And we would have then stormed away from each other and gone, maybe we shouldn't work together. So it's why we never really did work together in that way.
Can I ask you about how it is for you on stage? Because you're a performer and you have a routine, which you work very hard on, and you go and do that. But this is personal in a very different way, I'm assuming, than what you've done before. I know you talk about your kids. This feels different, and you're trying to make... You're there to entertain people, inform, entertain. I'm not sure how you'd phrase it. But how difficult is that for you?
When I first started doing the show, I thought I had made a terrible mistake, basically, because it was just too difficult. And when I was doing work-in-progress shows at Soho Theatre and Museum of Comedy, I was genuinely, you know, I was crying on stage. And I was thinking, I don't know if I can, because I booked to do the Edinburgh Fringe for 21 nights and booked to do a tour for like a long time. I don't know if I can do this.
When you say you were crying, so did you have an audience in front of you?
Yeah, in front of me. Oh, yeah. Like, because I'm sharing stuff that I've barely spoken about,
and these are like
at all.
tester shows almost.
Yeah, work in progress
How
shows.
did the audience react?
Again, there was a joke coming, so it was all right.
Right.
It's like, it's not unheard of to have serious things in a comedy show. I mean, you watch an episode of MASH, watch an episode of Scrubs. I mean, even, Blackadder famously, you can add serious things into comedy. So it's not unheard of. I just found it when I was first doing it, I thought it was going to be too difficult. And then the more I did it, by the sort of second, third night of the Edinburgh Fringe, I was really starting to quite enjoy it. And then it's, people are coming along, hundreds of people every night who never knew who Paul was, and they leave the room knowing who he was, and that's really gratifying.
What about reaction? Have people sort of spoken to you about... Because you doing that on stage, I would imagine anyone who suffered loss, and there would be plenty of people in any audience, any time, it could well have quite a big impact on them too. Yeah,
the feedback has been very strong, and sometimes people come up and they sort of say, I'm going to call my sister tomorrow, or I'm going to call my dad, because we haven't spoken. And that's very nice. And then I had one guy come up to me after the show with his wife at the Edinburgh Fringe, who'd lost his brother in 2021 to COVID. And he said, in front of his wife, he said, having watched that show, I now feel that my wife understands better what I've been going through than I've been able to communicate. I feel like she understands me now, having seen that show. And his wife just looked at me and just nodded, and I was like, wow, that's a lot to take on.
That is a lot to take on. And so were you one of those people who had struggled to talk about it, and then, lo and behold, you were kind of able to do it in front of strangers? Is that you?
I mean, I think I always knew I was going to do something about it in the show, but I thought maybe it was just going to be a 10-minute bit amongst a bigger show that was going to talk about other stuff, talk about the concept of tragedy plus time equaling humour. But as I started, it just took over the whole show, and I just found that once I started talking about it, there was... Because it's a weird thing about death. There's a lot of funny stuff just surrounds it. A lot of stuff just happens that is quite funny. I remember going to my auntie's funeral, and as the hearse rolled in, we all started crying. And then as it got closer, we looked at it and went, who are those people in that hearse? I realised it wasn't our auntie, it was a different funeral that was happening in the crematorium next door. Okay. And they were all looking at us going, who are these people crying at our deceased person? And then we all started laughing, because it's weird about death. It's just funny stuff just pops up.
How have friends of Paul reacted?
Oh, yeah. I think one of the nicest comments I've had about the show was, again, at the Edinburgh Fringe, somebody came up to me afterwards and said it was like getting to spend another hour with him. And that was a really nice thing to hear. Because I think, there's stuff in it when I talk about, like, an argument that we had and things we said. And I talk about funny things he had said about his own health and stuff like that. So, I could say I hope I'm doing him a service, as it were.
I read through some of the comments about your brother from your fellow comedians and people. I mean, he was really respected, wasn't he? There was, and not respecting. It's like, does it been injustice? They said he was super funny. That he was just a great talent to be around and inspiring.
And also, people referred to him almost like he was a therapist.
Yeah.
Because in the process of directing shows and helping people write their comedy shows, like I say, he would get into the heart of anything that was bothering them, trauma that had happened to them, any terrible thing in their past, and he would drag it out of them and help them find a way to make it funny. And that was kind of his thing. So as I say to the audience in the show, I say, he would absolutely want me to turn his death into a comedy show. So if you don't laugh at this, you're the ones disrespecting the dead. So that's the emotional blackmail I hit the audience with early doors.
Did you two ever try to out-funny each other?
Only in a nice way. Like, when comedians and people in the industry are together, we do have a tendency to just try and top each other, and someone will say something funny and someone else will come up with another line, and by the end of it, you've got 5 minutes. And then the only problem is everybody's sitting there going, right, who gets that? Who gets to use that stuff that we just come up with together?
All this comedy gold that you can't waste.
Yeah.
It's lovely to see you this morning. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
And the tour sounds, you know, really interesting and very different for all those reasons. Nice to see you here. Thank you very much. Ed's show's called Tragedy Plus Time. Is currently touring. That needs finishing, doesn't it? Tragedy Plus Time equals...
Yes, well, tragedy plus time equals comedy. That's the idea.
There you go.
There you go.